Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for this webinar on our performance management and pay closeout process for the 2012-2013 performance cycle. We have a number of topics to cover in the webinar today. We're going to begin by talking about a number of important changes to the process for this closeout. The most important one, or probably the one you're all most interested in, regarding merit pay. So for the first time in a number of years, there will be a modest pay component tied in part to people's performance ratings. And that is actually one of the reasons why we felt it is important to come out with some refresher training for our supervisors so that we can reinforce evaluating performance, review the rating scale, and make sure we're all aligned in kind of the principles of our performance management process. So some of the material that you're going to be hearing today is not really new material, particularly if you've gone through performance management training in the past, but it's simply a reinforcement given that merit pay is very likely going to be in effect. So let's go ahead and jump right in and start talking about merit pay. So merit pay is a component. Well, first of all, let me start by saying that merit pay is kind of a moving target. There are a lot of unanswered questions that we're still waiting for kind of some of those details about exactly how merit pay is going to be administered. So I'm going to go ahead and review what we do know and then share with you our frequently asked questions document that is very much a work in progress. And as we get additional information, we'll be updated. So merit pay was a component of the governor's talent agenda back in the fall. Merit pay is in addition to any cost of living increase that state employees will get this year. So I know that the governor had proposed a 1.5% cost of living increase for state employees. I understand there has been some discussion about whether that number might change, but we're going to go ahead and stick with the 1.5% since that's what I was originally told. Merit pay has two purposes really. The first is to reward performance. So employees who receive a higher PMAP rating tend to get a little bit more merit pay compared to lower rating. And the second purpose is also to move employees who are at close to the minimum of their salary range towards the middle of that salary band, to move them more towards what might be considered market pay. So the purpose is to achieve kind of both those things at the same time, and we'll take a look at how DPA is proposing we do that. Assuming that that merit pay is passed along in the long bill in May, which all signs are very positive in that regard so far, merit pay will actually pay out this July for employees who qualify. And so let's take a look at a matrix now that DPA has created that will be used statewide. Okay, so here is the matrix. Let's take a moment to look at this matrix and see what it's telling us. The columns that say quartiles, so first, second, third, fourth quartile, is where the employee sits in their classification salary band. So there's a little bit of math involved in kind of locating where you are in that salary range. And then the rows represent the PMAP rating of 1, 2, or 3. So what you can see in these percentages is an employee who is lower in their salary range tends to get a little bit more of a bump than employees who are in the third or the fourth quartile, kind of higher up in their salary range. And similarly, these higher PMAP ratings of 3 are a little larger than the 2 rating. So a couple things that you'll note right off. Performance rating of 1 are not eligible for merit pay. And that is because, as we said, one of the purposes of merit pay is to reward performance. So if you are rated a 1, you are currently not meeting performance expectations and are therefore not eligible. Another thing to note is that for employees in their fourth quartile of their pay band, Merit pay is not base building, so it will not represent a permanent raise. It would instead represent a one-time bonus. And I did receive clarification from DPA that that is actually, if an employee is anywhere in that fourth quartile, so 76% and above, would represent a one-time bonus. So it's not as though merit pay is going to take somebody in that fourth quartile and bring them to their max, and then whatever's left over is a bonus. It's actually anywhere in that fourth quartile would be paid out as a bonus. So what I have done, and I'm going to kind of switch the screen here and take us over to a merit pay frequently asked questions document that we have created. This resides on our Employment Affairs PMAP website, and you'll note that it has a date on here and a note that as we receive additional information about exactly how merit pay is going to work, we're going to update this document. So we've covered a number of these questions already. It has a link directly to DPA's compensation plan section. So by going to this link, it brings up the comp plan, and so you can see the salary ranges for all the different classifications. We talked about being a one-time bonus or base building. We talked about employees who receive PMAP rating of 1 are not eligible for merit pay, and it is in addition to any cost of living adjustment. A quick word about merit pay being funded. As I said, merit pay will be, it is already part of the budget request that we submitted last year, and all signs are very positive that it is actually going to be included in the long bill this year. So we'll know for sure, obviously, when that passes. But the decision to fund it will, of course, be made on a year-to-year basis. A couple quick questions I'll answer now, and then I'll review the chat for some additional questions about merit pay. An employee must be still employed with the state system in July in order to receive merit pay. So if you have an employee who is considering perhaps retiring in April or May or June, this may impact their decision, especially if they're in that, in kind of that fourth quartile. So it's not like if an employee separates from the state system in, April or May that we're going to mail a check. You must still be employed in July to receive merit pay. Similarly, if you're hired after the performance cycle ends, or if you have employees who are hired after the performance cycle ends, which is March 31st, they will not receive merit pay since they were not with us during the performance cycle. And a big unknown question that we have that we're still awaiting information is, will merit pay be prorated at all based on how long an employee has been with the state during the performance cycle? And the answer is it could be. DPA is discussing it right now, making a decision, and is working out details on how that would look. So again, when you are, if you're getting questions from your employees about merit pay, I'm going to switch back to the slides now. Just please be aware that there are lots of details that we still don't know yet, but this is fully what we expect to happen. Let's go ahead and go through a quick example first, and then we'll take some questions. So as I said, there's a little bit of math involved. So let's go through an example where you have an employee whose salary range goes from $20,000 to $40,000. First, you got to work out the quartiles. So 20 being the minimum and 40 being the max. You have to basically divide it into 4. So 20 to 25,000, 25,000 to 30, 30 to 35,000, and 35,000 to 40. So in the case of an employee who you're giving a PMAP rating of 2 and they have a current salary of $22,000, they're down here in that first quartile. They would be eligible for a merit pay of 1.8%, and it would be base building. Another example, an employee who is also getting a PMAP rating of 2, but their salary is higher in the range, $32,000. That puts them there in this third quartile of 1.1% and still base building. So let me go ahead and pause here and see if we've had any questions related to merit pay. So the question is, by paying out in July, is it a one-time payout or does it begin in July? So my understanding is for individuals who are in that fourth quartile, it would be a one-time bonus coming all at once. Again, if we receive further clarification in that, I'll put it on the FAQ document, but for individuals in their first, second, and third quartile, it would begin as a salary, a salary raise added to their paycheck. Can we get a copy of this document? Yes, it is. This Merit Pay FAQ document is on our Employment Affairs website in the PMAP section, and I will be showing you a link to that as we go along in the broadcast. So the question is, so if employees are in the 1 to 3 quartiles, they get a monthly increase of that %, but someone in the fourth quartile gets a one-time bonus. That is correct. An excellent question raised that we do not yet know the answer yet to is, will merit pay be calculated before or after the cost of living increase? And that I do not know. So that is a question that I have written down and am waiting for clarification from DPA. Another unknown question that I have is, as many of you know, DPA has proposed changes to the pay raises based on a large salary study that they did. And a question that I've asked but do not have an answer to yet is this merit pay based on our current salary range or the new salary ranges, or what the new salary ranges would be should they be approved in the long bill? So, several unknowns still. Any other questions related to merit pay? You can, of course, type them in in your chat section, and we can address them at a later time. But before we move on, okay. All right. The second change that I wanted to mention is kind of an administrative change about how PMAP ratings are going to be entered and communicated to HR. In the past, if you've been with us as a supervisor, you're aware that our PMAP ratings, so supervisors received Excel spreadsheets containing a list of their direct reports, and they would use those spreadsheets to enter final ratings and send them into HR. OIT has been kind enough to build us a new data entry tool. Not a lot of bells and whistles, but it's definitely an improvement over spreadsheets. And this is the tool that will be used to enter ratings. And an important thing that I want you to know, and has been sent in some of the emails that have been sent out regarding PMAPs, is that supervisors, and in an effort to streamline the process, supervisors are not going to be using this tool. Instead, offices and divisions have identified a limited number of PMAP coordinators to use this tool to enter final ratings, as well as to track completion and then send the final forms to HR. And those PMAP coordinators have been identified and communicated with, and they will be receiving training next week, actually, about their roles and responsibilities and how to use this tool. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on how to use this tool because most people watching are probably not going to be the ones using it. But there's drop-downs, and it's a little easier to modify and update and make any changes that are needed to the direct report list. And then there's a button that actually emails ratings directly to HR. And then there's some tracking functionality on our end as well. Okay. So let's go ahead and take some time to just review our timeline and the documentation that's required with PMAP. There's nothing new here in our timeline. As usual, our annual cycle always goes from April 1st to March 31st. Those year-end PMAP ratings are due to HR by April 30th. So again, those PMAP coordinators are going to be contacting you, collecting those ratings, and using that tool to enter those ratings and send them to HR by April 30th. Then the actual PMAP forms and accompanying documents are due to HR the following month by the end of May 31st. Another little change we have in the process is that instead of sending hard copy forms through the mail, for example, that was used in the past, PMAP coordinators are actually going to be scanning documents to HR So there is a change there, and they'll be informed about the, the process and the protocol for doing that. PMAP disputes are, as usual, need to be resolved by June 26th. And new PMAP plans for the following year are due to employees by April 30th. So at the same time as you're having those discussions closing out this performance cycle, you'll be preparing performance plans and communicating those to employees for the next cycle by April 30th. Those plans, the new plans, do not need to be sent to HR. Those actually just reside in your supervisory files. And at least one interim kind of mid-year review should be done by the middle of October. We, of course, encourage more reviews done more frequently throughout the performance cycle, but at least one is required throughout the by the middle of October. Documentation sent along with the PMAPs includes certificate of compliance, fraud policy, confidentiality agreement, and any flex place agreements that you may have in place with your employees. So these are all documents that should be reviewed and signed off on during that final review meeting. There is a checklist of these documents that has been provided to PMAP coordinators, and it is also available on our Employment Affairs PMAP website. Any questions for me so far before we go forward? We had a question, what if a supervisor doesn't give a midterm PMAP review? Well, I guess you can't really go back in time and kind of do one, but just know going forward that you should be conducting a mid-year review with employees. Another question, where did you say this document will be located on the website? So I'll show you the link for that at the end of this webinar, but I can describe it in the meantime. If you go to the home page and to Employment Affairs, I'm sorry, let me type this in the chat section. How about that? And I'll say, too, that in the email reminders that were sent to supervisors in the last couple of weeks, it also has a link to the Employment Affairs PMAP website. So, homepage, Office of Administrative Solutions, Employment Affairs, Human Resources, and PMAP section. And if you're having trouble locating it, you can always get in contact with anyone in your HR department or myself if you need to. You're welcome. Okay. A question. As I understand it, not every employee signs the confidentiality agreement for position. Confidentiality agreement. The checklist was recently updated to include information that the confidentiality agreement is intended for employees whose the nature of their job puts them in contact with confidential information, so patient information, social security numbers, salaries, positions like accounting, human resources, IT, other positions that may involve confidential information. If you are unsure whether that applies to your employees, go ahead and just have them sign it, or contact your HR specialist and we can research that for you. A question, are the Certificate of Compliance, Fraud Policy, Confidentiality Agreement required to be signed every year, or are the ones on file from previous year okay? No, we do need to have them signed again every year. So a new one acknowledging, understanding for each of the years. What happens if someone refuses to sign any of the agreements? So you can write on there, employee refused to sign. However, I would also acknowledge on there that the information was reviewed with the employee and they simply refused to sign. And I would say too, have a discussion with the employee, see what the concern is, and definitely encouraging signing. There's nothing dangerous about signing these documents. It's simply an acknowledgement that they understand some of our very important policies. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have for now. Feel free to keep them coming, and we'll pause to review. Okay, let's go ahead and go to our next topic, evaluating performance and kind of having that year-end performance discussion. Let's start by reviewing the rating scale. As I said, now that merit pay is very, very likely in effect this year, it's important for us to kind of regroup, realign, and take a look at the rating scale, which really provides the guidelines for how we evaluate performance. The full definition of the rating scale is actually included on the PMAP forms. There's a little paragraph that describes each section. But here's some key words that we have on our screen here. So a PMAP rating of 1 indicates the person who is really not meeting the performance expectations that you set forth in your plan. They're just not consistently meeting it. It's unsatisfactory performance. Maybe they're requiring substantial monitoring and close supervision to ensure, even a very basic level of performance. A PMAP rating of 2 really encompasses a large range of performance. This is where most of our employees kind of sit on this scale. It includes employees who are successful in their job, they are reliable, they are proficient, they are doing everything you ask of you, and on occasion they do a little more. And I understand that sometimes that word exceeds kind of throws some people off, so I want to emphasize that it's an occasionally that this person is exceeding your expectations. But I want to make clear that a performance rating of 2 is a good rating. This is the person who comes in every day, they're doing everything you ask of you, they're the reason that we're able to be in business and serve our customers, and sometimes they're even doing a little bit more than you ask. These are very valued employees in our organization and should be told as such. The performance rating of 3 are your outstanding, consistently exceeding expectations, exceptional employees. Words here that you might think of are people who are showing initiative. They have ideas. They're asking, what can I do to improve our business? Or here's my idea for how we can improve how we do things. Creativity. They're your role models that you look to say, wow, why can't everyone be like this person? Your real role models. And let's go ahead and really kind of delve into kind of the difference between a 2 and a 3. I've taken the liberty of just highlighting a couple of the the key words here that might help you differentiate 2s and 3s. So again, PMAP rating of 2 is we're meeting expectations, we're reliable, we're occasionally exceeding expectations, whereas a PMAP 3 is really consistently exceeding your expectations again and again. PMAP rating of 2, they may have some documented impact beyond their regular job assignment, whereas a PMAP 3 is really advancing and making a great impact to your business. So you may think of it in terms of frequency. How often does the person really go above and beyond? You may think of it in terms of duration. Is it a long period of time during the entire course of the year where this person has really stepped up? And then impact. What has been the impact of this person's performance? And I take the time to really talk about the difference between 2 and a 3, not because I discourage people from giving 3s. If you have people that you feel deserve 3s, I want you to give them a 3. I want you to to justify it, to provide the evidence that you have, and give them 3s. So I want to be clear that the message today with merit pay is not to discourage threes, to say we shouldn't be giving threes because we can't afford it, because we can. The message is differentiate, and for people who you feel deserve threes, go ahead and give them threes. Now, of course, we can't go wild and have all 5,000 people in our organization have threes. Obviously, that can't happen. So again, the importance of really differentiating between the 2 and the 3. Okay. So in terms of evaluating performance, really the principles there are you have to consider all of the information that you have observed over the course of the performance cycle. So what have you observed? What sort of work product, deliverables, interactions that you have had with the employee? What have you seen? It's entirely appropriate to ask for input from other people, so coworkers, peers, customers that the individual works with. It's entirely appropriate to say, if you know that your employee is working with a particular other individual on a project, to reach out to that individual and say, hey, I know you're working with my person on this project. Can you tell me, give me some feedback. How's it going? I always encourage supervisors, if it makes sense for their business, to ask their employees to prepare a self-evaluation. May not make sense for all your employees, but for some it may. And that could be as simple as having the employee review their performance plan, and for each of the competencies, write up a narrative. What have you accomplished? And it's a really good basis for having a performance discussion and kind of aligning what the employee feels that they have accomplished and what you feel that they have accomplished. It's a really good basis for discussion. And then in the end, there's no magic formula for arriving at your final ratings. It's really you considering all the evidence and using your best judgment as a supervisor to arrive at a final evaluation. If we worked at a widget factory, it's easy to count up the widgets and measure them, and are they the right angles and whatnot, but in a lot of the work that we do here at CVHS, a lot of the evaluation that you will make is based on your observations of their behavior and the quality of their performance. And a point I want to emphasize here in terms of coming to your final evaluations is do remember that we have a review process where your ratings have to be signed off on by a reviewer. And especially this year with merit pay being in effect, do not communicate your final PMAP ratings to employees until you have received approval from your reviewer. In addition, there are some divisions who do have kind of an escalated review process, particularly for PMAP 3 ratings. That's not department-wide at this point, but I would encourage supervisors to check with your leadership and ask, do we have a special process, or is there anything special I need to do for a PMAP 3 rating? And it may be that you are asked to provide a little extra justification for that level of rating. A couple of things to consider as you're evaluating performance. I always encourage supervisors to not let just 1 or 2 minor hiccups over the course of the year overwhelm otherwise satisfactory, stable, really consistent performance. Now, if those incidents are very critical and have really done some kind of great damage, of course you need to take them into considerations. But just be aware, particularly if they happen more recently towards the end of the performance cycle and they're fresh in your mind, just be aware. And similarly, don't let 1 or 2 good minor incidents overwhelm otherwise really mediocre, not very good performance over the course of the year. If an employee has been struggling, I want you to consider what efforts were made to improve to an extent. It's important if we have employees who are struggling that they're trying, and we see that and we acknowledge that. At some point, though, the employee does need to exhibit that satisfactory performance. We have a business need for employees to be performing at a certain level. So I say consider effort, but consider it to an extent. And really importantly, do not give a satisfactory rating to avoid a difficult conversation. So I understand how uncomfortable it can be to sit with an employee and deliver that difficult, candid feedback. But please, using the rating scale, give the rating that the performance deserves. And in terms of the actual meeting itself, the best thing you can do is really prepare for the discussion and know the message that you want to deliver to the employee. Particularly if you're new at this, if this is your first time, write yourself talking points. Just plan out the message that you want the employee to receive. A tack you might take is to simply go competency by competency, review your competency ratings, and then the overall rating that you've arrived at. And I say here no employee should be surprised, so hopefully, performance feedback and coaching has been going on throughout the year so that the employee doesn't get to, the month of April in their final evaluation meeting and is surprised by their final rating. Again, it's very important to communicate to employees, particularly in that PMAP 2 level, how valued they are to their organization and how we would not be achieving our mission and our objectives without them. I know, and we are no different from any other organization that I have worked in and done performance management in, but particularly that middle rating can seem sort of deflating to employees. They say, oh, I'm average. And if you look at our rating scale, that is not the case in all cases. This is actually a pretty high bar. You're doing everything we've asked of you and sometimes a little more, and thank you so much for all you do. So hopefully that is the message that's being communicated to employees. And then, of course, you have to obtain signatures on the required documentation that we talked about. This is the actual website. It's kind of long. To our Employment Affairs PMAP website is on this slide right here. A couple special situations we'll cover real quick about new employees. So a new employee who is a performance plan is supposed to be created for employees within the first 30 days of hire. So if an employee has been hired in the month of March, a final PMAP rating is not required because the employee is in that first 30 days. You can certainly submit a rating if you feel that you have enough information to actually rate that employee. But in cases where you feel it's too new to rate, keep in mind that there's that 30-day window where a performance plan is actually required. A change in supervisor, typically what happens is if a supervisor is leaving, they are supposed to complete an interim evaluation that goes to a new supervisor, and that new supervisor uses that information, takes it into consideration when coming to a final evaluation, a final rating for that employee. Similarly, and when an employee transfers within CDHS, what happens is the supervisor losing the employee completes an interim evaluation, and the receiving supervisor starts a new plan and takes into consideration the old plan and the old evaluation when coming to their final rating. And then when an employee actually separates from CHS entirely, the supervisor losing the employee is supposed to complete an evaluation at that time, and that gets typically sent along with all the rest of the separation paperwork to HR. So do we have any questions about any of the information that I've covered here in the last few minutes? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go forward then. So while the main purpose of our webinar today was to kind of talk about merit pay and kind of the closeout process and evaluating performance and reviewing the rating scale, we did want to also be forward-looking and talk about setting performance plans for the following year. So let's talk about performance expectations and kind of the principles of writing good performance expectations, and we'll go through some examples as well. So a performance expectation is very simply, it's just a description of the results that you expect your employees to be achieving. What exactly are they supposed to be doing in order to be a satisfactory, fully satisfied performance? It really defines how well a function or task has to be performed, so there's typically a quality component to it, a quality or timeliness component to it. And it's really what you are going to use as your benchmark to evaluate performance. How will you know that the employee has accomplished what you asked them to accomplish? Performance expectations should be based on the PD, so there should be a strong link between the performance plan and the PD. If there are expectations that you have for your employee that are not connected to the PD, then my advice is that you update the PD to reflect those job duties. Performance expectations must be mutually understood. This means that both the supervisor and the employee are clear on what the employee is going to be held accountable for. It's very important that you ask questions to ensure understanding, and you check in over time to make sure that you're aligned. Developed with input of the employee if possible. It's great to sit down with the employee and ask, what do you want to accomplish this year? What do you see for yourself over the next performance cycle? I know it's not always possible to set expectations that you can't always only base it on what the employee wants. Sometimes there's simply tasks that have to be done that are kind of handed down. But if at all possible, it's excellent to have input from the employee. Measurable and observable. I'm sure we've all heard the acronym of SMART. So expectations should be specific about what you expect from the employee, measurable to the extent that you can, achievable, realistic, and timely. And we'll go through some examples. And I always encourage supervisors to write expectations that are challenging. You want employees to strive and to have a high bar that they're trying to reach, but they still have to be reasonable and obtainable. So I always say don't set your expectations to the impossible level, but make them challenging so people want to achieve. Expectations should be incorporated into the PMAP form, and we'll take a look at that form in a second just to reemphasize and refresh our memories. So we have 5 competencies in our PMAP system: customer service, accountability, communication, interpersonal skills, and job knowledge. Supervisors have 2 additional: performance management and empowerment. And on the form, there's a lot of space for you to modify this and create your performance plan as you need to suit your business. So each competency comes with a definition and a number of bullet points that broadly define what that competency is about. There's a section called evaluation criteria where you would incorporate the more specific performance expectations that you have for your employee. Measurement process is the portion of the form where you indicate how are you going to measure against these expectations. Is it going to be job observation, input from others? Are there some sort of customer surveys or other data that are used that you're going to be using to evaluate the employee? And then there's also space for kind of individual performance objectives or specific goals that the employee has for that year. So some examples here. I won't necessarily go through each and every one of these, but here's some example performance expectations. So maintaining 95% accuracy in the case verification process. So this employee's job may be there's some sort of verification of cases that they're conducting, and that's what's in their PD. But this expectation puts a quality component to it, that you're going to maintain 95% accuracy. And you'd want to say how you're going to measure that. Standardize and document 5 internal processes or procedures. So this employee has in their PD that it's their job to write processes and procedures for their unit. this expectation has a specific quantity component to it. You need to standardize and document 5 this year. This next one has kind of a time component to it. Your job is you're working on this project, but I need you to complete it using internal resources by such and such date. And I always encourage supervisors to include a timeline or a deadline when it makes sense for the quality of the work or the performance of the work, but you don't necessarily have to put an actual time component on every single one if it doesn't make sense. And so these others, as you can see, have other quality components. So I'm returning phone calls by this specific time. My PD may say that I need to interact with customers, but this expectation is putting an actual quality and timeliness component to it. Some other examples that we have here, these are kind of more soft skill ones, more related to teamwork, being positive, how you're going to interact with people, how you're going to communicate with people, adhering to your specific work schedule, being on time, being prepared. These are all examples of specific expectations that you might outline for your employees. When to set expectations, as we said, performance plans are due for new employees within 30 days of their start date. If there's anything about the job that changes, it's appropriate and highly encouraged to update the performance plan to reflect that. So don't think that the plan that you set at the beginning of the year is set in stone. If there's anything that changes about the job, or if you're a new supervisor and you need to set additional or more concrete performance expectations, definitely revise those performance plans as needed. And at any time throughout the year, even if you're not a new supervisor, if you feel that clarification is needed of responsibilities, if your employees are simply just not aligned and not clear on your expectations, pull out the plan and modify and review as needed to make sure that your employees are clear on what you expect of them. Questions as we move on? Okay, we're going to go into our final topic today, which is a review of some principles of coaching and feedback. As we said, one formal coaching feedback session due during the course of the year, but highly encouraged to be giving continual coaching and feedback to your employees. So if you're a new supervisor, this may not come very natural or be very easy at first. However, don't let that stop you from starting from this point forward to really have these regular coaching sessions with your employees. And it doesn't have to be a formal sit down. It can be formal. It can be in a hallway. It can be, hey, can I talk to you for a second in my office? It doesn't have to be an actual monthly meeting that you set up on your calendar and it's very formal and we're bringing binders and folders and whatnot. It can be informal as well. This is a model that I like to use that just shows some of the principles of coaching and feedback. I have candid at the very top of this model, and that means being honest with your employees about what you're seeing and what needs to improve and not sugarcoating the message. All employees should know where they stand in your eyes in terms of their performance. And again, so they're not surprised at the end of the year. Specific is about saying specifically what you're seeing and what the employee needs to accomplish in your eyes. I like to talk about a model that I call what why. So what I'm seeing from you is this. Why is that a problem? Here's the impact it's having on our team or our business. What can you do to improve? And why is that going to be better? Why is that going to be better for our team or our business? So what why will really help you be specific in your feedback. Positive and developmental. So when you see great performance, it is so important to reinforce, this is what you did. I cannot thank you enough for doing that. Here is why it helped us in some way, really reinforcing that positive behavior. But then also addressing, when development is needed as well. Timely and frequent. It doesn't help employees if you wait until October and say, hey, last May I saw that you did such and such and that was a problem. Really being timely when you're seeing something that needs to be addressed, addressing it right away. And again, if it's simply bringing someone into the office saying, hey, I just wanted to talk to you about this real quick, then that's what you should do. Providing specific actions or sitting down and brainstorming specific actions that can be taken to improve. And it's entirely appropriate to ask employees as well, what do you think is going on? What do you think needs to be done? Or what can I do to help you? And then keeping coaching job related and feedback job related. So I always encourage supervisors to really bring it back to how the performance is impacting the job. So even if you are seeing interpersonal issues, you're seeing people not getting along, tie it to the job. So instead of saying, you need to get along with Mary, tie it to how the interpersonal interaction is inhibiting communication, teamwork, work product getting done, patient care, mistakes being made, really tying it to why it's a problem. Monitoring and evaluating performance. This is kind of a review of what we talked about with, coming to a final evaluation. You're going to be, observing what you've seen the employee in terms of their work output or their interactions. If you have employees who are remote, you may not be able to observe them every day. But so you'll either need to conduct periodic visits or utilize technology in some way to be able to evaluate their performance. It might be more difficult, but so you'll just have to be creative in terms of gathering information about your employees. You'll be looking for trends over time. So you may notice employees' performance kind of gradually decreasing or steadily improving, which would be a good thing. Looking at critical incidents, these are kind of outstanding examples of either successes or failures, and really taking the time to understand why you observe performance that's successful and why you observe performance that's below standards, so that you know how to address it. And I have on the next couple slides just some questions that perhaps might be useful for supervisors who are trying to answer that question of why is this performance happening, so that I know how to address it. I found these on an academic website. I didn't make these up, but it struck me that these might be useful for someone when they're trying to answer that question. So ask yourself, what expectations have been set for this employee? Does the employee understand those expectations? How do you know? If they don't understand them, why not? Has no one been meeting with them? Has it been 6 months since anyone talked to them about their performance? Do they know what success looks like? How do you know? Have you asked them? Does the employee know that their performance is marginal? How do you know? Has anyone sat down and talked with them? Are there any obstacles that have come up, and can you remove them? What is the employee struggling with, and can you help? Has the employee ever performed this task satisfactorily? Has something new happened that is maybe hindering performance? Is the employee willing and able to learn? So this is kind of bordering on more of a progressive discipline topic. But at some point it could be that the employee knows exactly what's expected of them and knows how to do it, but there's more of an unwillingness kind of component, and that should be addressed very swiftly and very strongly in our progressive discipline process and tools. A couple questions that I thought were interesting to consider, for supervisors or even your leadership team in your unit or your division. Are your strong performers getting dumped on and having excessive work because you can count on them? And are your kind of borderline performers having work taken away from them? And is it getting dumped on your higher performers? That is something that really needs to be avoided, because over time your superstar performers can get overloaded and really demotivated and demoralized. So questions to consider in that way. This next slide has kind of a process or some pointers for those who are maybe new at giving feedback and just need to know maybe how can I structure the conversation. The first two, just stating specifically what you observe and why it's a problem. So that's that what-why model that I talked about before. What I'm observing is this, and it's a problem for these reasons. And here's what I need you to do to improve, and this is why it's going to be better. So what-why. It's important to ask questions and to listen to the employee and what their point of view is and what they think is happening with performance, but still reiterating the expectations that you have. So the employee may have in their mind a number of obstacles or have some, you got to listen for excuses, but really reiterating, I understand, but I have a business need that my employees are performing at such and such level. So let's brainstorm and see what we can do. Is there information, training, other resources you need? What can I do to help? Because I do have a business need for you to perform at this certain level. Asking specifically for a commitment to improve the behavior. Sitting down and coming up with a plan. Here's the 5 actions we've talked about. Here's when you're going to do them. Do I have your commitment that you're actually going to do them? Expressing appreciation. Thank you for going through these improvement efforts. You are valued. And then setting up regular meetings to kind of review progress is very important. So you can have the initial conversation, you can come up with your plan, but if there's no follow-up on it, it's probably not going to work. So just some ideas for kind of structuring that conversation. A quick word on documentation. It's really important that supervisors are maintaining some kind of a file for their employees where they are including, the PD, the PMAP, any notes or documentation of things that you've observed over the performance cycle that you want to be sure to include in your final evaluation. If you've ever waited until around about the middle of March, as we are now, and opened up that performance plan and started to, do your evaluation and write down what you've observed, it can be pretty painful to try to remember back to October or to April of last year. What did that employee accomplish and what happened in June? And so really not waiting until the year-end review to start reviewing your performance. I always advise supervisors to keep their notes job-related and just refrain from kind of personal issues and just really focusing on the facts of the performance that you've observed. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and see if there's any other questions. If you have questions about anything we've talked about, even if you want to go all the way back to merit pay, feel free to type those in. So the slides are available on that PMAP website. So I have a copy of the slides, and also, like I said, we are recording this webinar and hope to have that recording out on that PMAP website within a matter of days. So if you know people who didn't get a chance to watch today, it'll be available on demand. So we had a question from someone about, remember I mentioned if your employee has been hired in the month of March that a PMAP rating is not required. If you have someone who's they're hired at the very end of February, I would say use your judgment. If you feel that you have enough information and you've formed an evaluation and you want to provide a rating, feel free. I'm not going to say that you absolutely have to if it's very borderline. We have to draw the line somewhere, but at the same time I want to be reasonable and I want to do what makes sense for you. Had a question about merit pay, just re-emphasizing, what does one-time bonus for top quartile mean? So if I go ahead and go back to our merit pay frequently asked questions document here, we have our merit pay matrix that DPA has provided. So if employees are, if you think of their entire salary band for their classification, if they're up in this 4th quartile, they're going to receive this merit pay, whatever it is, as a one-time bonus. It's not going to be added to their salary as a salary increase. Okay. So the slides will be are available on the PMAP website, as well as the recording of this webinar. I see we are at the end here, so if you have to leave us, I want to thank you for joining. I hope this information was useful to you. Again, check the PMAP website for updates to that merit pay document, as well as the other resources that we have out there for you. All right, we're going to go ahead and end. Thank you so much for your time. If you have additional questions, reach out to your HR specialist or myself if you need to. This is Morgan Murphy in your Employment Affairs Division. Thank you very much, everyone.